my son demanded my house. When I refused, his eyes darkened. Then I'll find another way, he muttered. That night, a black pickup with no license plates rolled into my quiet street in Des Moines, Iowa. You wouldn't believe what happened next. Let me tell you, I've lived in this house for over 40 years. Every inch of it carries memories of family dinners, Christmas mornings, and hard-earned victories. That night, though, the house felt different, almost like it was holding its breath. Earlier that evening, my son, Eric, barged into the kitchen with all the subtlety of a thunderstorm. He slammed the door so hard my coffee mug rattled on the counter. Eric's face was red, his suit jacket tossed aside, and his tie hanging loose. "Dad," he snapped, "Amanda's losing her mind about money again." I kept stirring the mashed potatoes, trying to calm my nerves. The roast was still in the oven, filling the kitchen with the kind of warmth only a real home can give. "Son, patience builds character. You're a hard worker, Eric." He stomped across the linoleum I'd laid down with my own hands 2 decades ago. "That's easy for you to say, Dad. You never had to listen to your wife comparing you to every successful neighbor on the block." He flopped into his usual chair at the oak table. "Amanda wants everything: new car, fancy kitchen, European vacations." I set down the plates, watching him. The lines on his face looked deeper than last Christmas. "What started the fight this time?" "Lauren's mom picked her up in a Tesla," he grumbled. "Amanda spent all afternoon looking up prices and telling me I'm not providing enough for the family." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration pouring out. "Good things take time," I said, pouring him a cup of black coffee, just the way he liked it. "She threatened to leave me again," Eric said quietly, looking away. "Said she won't waste her best years with a man who doesn't have ambition." I started carving the roast, just like my late wife, Helen, taught me when we first got married and could barely afford meat once a week. Eric poked at his dinner, his phone buzzing constantly on the table. "She's probably texting about some new thing we can't afford." We ate in the kind of silence that only comes from decades of shared troubles and quiet support. The house was filled with the smells of home-cooked food and the quiet tick of the old clock in the hallway. After dinner, I'd brought out apple pie, still warm from the oven. Eric finally relaxed, almost smiling. "I always feel better after eating here," he said. "Amanda's too busy to cook real food." We talked a while longer about the good old days, about tough times and how we got through them. That's what families do, we hang on, even when the world seems set against us. Then Eric changed the subject. "Dad, a realtor called yesterday. Jessica Rogers. She offered $700,000 for the house." I took a sip of coffee. "I'm not selling my house." Eric jumped up, barely touching his pie. "Are you crazy? That's more money than most people see in their lives." He started pacing, waving his hands. "Amanda would finally be happy. The kids could go to the best colleges. Their college funds are fine," I reminded him. He ignored me, leaning in close. "Dad, you're 70 years old. Why do you need this big house? You could live comfortably, travel, do whatever you want." I stood up, feeling every one of my years. "What makes you think I'm worried about expenses now?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Because you shouldn't have to worry. And Amanda, she'll leave if things don't get better." The conversation hung in the air, heavy as a thundercloud. I led Eric into the living room, where old photos lined the mantel. "This isn't just a house, son. I bought it after years of saving every extra penny. Your mother made this place a home, planting those roses out front the first spring we lived here. You took your first steps right there by that coffee table." Eric shook his head. "Dad, times have changed. Money matters more than old stories." I sat down, feeling the worn leather of my favorite chair. "You say that now, but someday you'll realize what really matters." He stared at me, frustration boiling over. "You're sitting on a fortune, And you won't even help your own son. I looked up at him, my heart aching for the boy he used to be, the boy who once ran to me for comfort, not cash. I gave you everything I had, I said quietly. But I won't sell my life's work just to buy you out of trouble. That night, after Eric left in a storm of anger, I double-checked every lock in the house. Something in his eyes had changed. I knew I'd see that black pickup again, and when I did, I'd be ready. That night was colder than most spring evenings in Iowa. I sat in my old recliner, the house silent except for the steady ticking of the grandfather clock Helen bought on our 20th anniversary. I replayed the argument with Eric in my mind, unable to settle. His anger had crossed a line I never thought he'd even approach. The wind rattled the windows, and I tried to read, but my eyes kept drifting to the driveway. Around 2:30 a.m. I heard it, a low, rumbling engine, headlights off, easing down the street. My heart raced. I peeked through the curtains, careful not to be seen. A black pickup, windows tinted, rolled to a stop at the curb. No license plates. 3 figures in dark hoodies stepped out, their movements hurried and tense. One of them limped slightly, a detail I'd remember. They crept up the walkway, flashlights bobbing, whispering in quick, nervous bursts. I recognized one of those voices. Eric tried to disguise his speech, but a father knows. I didn't panic. Instead, I quietly retrieved the old baseball bat I kept in the closet. Didn't own a gun anymore, Helen hated them, but I had enough backbone to defend my home. I dialed 911 on the cordless, whispering to the dispatcher as I moved upstairs, out of sight but with a clear view down the hall. The men tried the door first. Finding it locked, they went around to the back porch. I heard the soft metallic click of tools on my back door, then a frustrated grunt when the lock didn't give. They weren't professionals, just desperate. "Let's break a window," one of them whispered, panic starting to rise. "No! Too loud," Eric hissed. "Dad's a light sleeper." He was right about that. I tightened my grip on the bat, praying the police would hurry. I thought of Helen's roses outside, of Lauren and Tommy's childhood laughter, of every memory these walls had guarded. I wasn't about to let Eric or anyone else destroy them for a quick payday. The men circled back to the front, growing more anxious. Suddenly, the front porch light flicked on. I'd wired it to a motion sensor after Helen passed, a small project to keep my hands busy. The intruders froze, their faces ghostly in the sudden light. A voice boomed through the darkness. "This is the police! Hands where we can see them!" Red and blue lights flashed down the street. 2 patrol cars blocked the driveway. The would-be burglars scattered like startled deer, but Eric hesitated just long enough for one of the officers to grab him by the arm. It all happened in seconds. The other 2 men disappeared into the night. Eric, face pale and terrified, stood on my front lawn in handcuffs, stammering that it was all a misunderstanding. I stepped out onto the porch, my knees shaky but my voice steady. "That's my son," I told the officer. "But he's no burglar." The words stung as I spoke them, but the truth was sharper than any lie I could tell. The officer, a stocky man with a stern jaw, looked between us. "We found burglary tools on him. You know these other 2? I shook my head. "Just Eric. The others must have talked him into something stupid." Eric wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, I'm sorry, Amanda, I cut him off. "You brought strangers to our family home in the middle of the night, Eric. What did you expect me to do?" He tried to explain, but the words fell apart in his mouth. Amanda's demands? The mounting debt. The hopelessness that led him to consider stealing from his own father. The officers questioned us both. I told them I wouldn't press charges, but they made it clear there'd be a record of the incident. Eric was released to my custody just before dawn, sitting silently in the passenger seat as I drove him back to my house. Inside, the house was still. The only sound was the humming of the old fridge and Eric's uneven breathing. He finally spoke, voice raw with shame. Dad, I don't know who I am anymore. I just wanted to make things right. I thought if we could just get out of debt, if Amanda would stop yelling, if the kids could have what their friends have. I sighed, feeling the weight of his regret, his desperation. Son, you crossed a line. Family means everything, but it doesn't mean you take what isn't yours. You want to fix your life? Start by facing the truth. Stop blaming everyone else. Eric nodded, tears shining in his eyes. For a long while, neither of us spoke. I poured 2 cups of coffee, set them on the table, and waited for the sun to rise. Later that morning, Amanda called, demanding to know where Eric was. He tried to explain, but she hung up before he finished. The damage was done, there was no easy fix now. After Eric left, I stood in the quiet kitchen, memories swirling around me like dust in a sunbeam. I'd nearly lost everything I'd spent a lifetime building, all for the sake of a son who'd forgotten what matters most. But I was still standing. The house was still mine. And I knew, deep down, that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The morning after that long, terrible night, I watched Eric shuffle out the front door, shoulders slumped under the weight of what he'd done. He couldn't even look me in the eye, not really. I wondered if he'd ever be able to. I closed the door softly behind him and leaned against it, the silence pressing heavy on my chest. I wandered into the living room, where the first morning light touched the old photographs above the fireplace. There was Helen in her wedding dress, our first Christmas in this house, Lauren and Tommy blowing out birthday candles at the kitchen table. All those moments, all that life lived right here. I ran my fingers along the mantel, feeling every nick and scratch in the wood, each one a memory. That day, I tried to go about my usual routine, feeding the birds, checking the mail, walking through the garden. But my mind kept spinning. I kept thinking about what could have happened, what nearly did. 40 years in this house, and never once had I felt afraid inside my own walls. Until last night. The phone rang just after lunch. It was Officer Daniels, the same man who'd arrived first at my door. Mr. Reynolds, he said, just checking in. We've still got your son's statement on file, and you might get a call from the DA's office. But since you're not pressing charges, this will mostly go down as an attempted break-in. I thanked him, assuring him I'd let him know if I noticed anything suspicious. You did everything right, he said, and I could hear the kindness in his voice. If you need anything, don't hesitate. After the call, I sat in the old rocking chair on the back porch. The air was thick with the scent of Helen's roses, blooming wild against the fence. My neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, was out tending her tomatoes. She waved, her brow creased in concern. Heard sirens last night, she called. Everything all right? I hesitated. I didn't want gossip spreading up and down the street, but I also couldn't lie. Just a family matter, Janice, I replied. Nothing to worry about. She nodded, accepting my answer, but I could see the questions in her eyes. In a town like ours, news traveled fast. That afternoon, Eric texted me. Just one line, I'm sorry, Dad. I don't know what else to say. I sat with that message a long while, fingers hovering over the keys, searching for words. Finally, I typed back, come by tomorrow. We need to talk face to face. No more running away. He replied almost instantly. Okay. I spent the rest of the day cleaning the damage, nothing too serious, just a few scuffed locks and muddy footprints near the back door. I replaced the batteries in the motion sensor lights, checked the deadbolts twice, and sat down to make a list of things I'd need to repair. Busy work to keep my mind off the ache inside. As evening fell, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Lauren standing there, holding a casserole dish and looking worried. She'd heard from Amanda, of course she had. In our family, word always got around, even the things you wanted to keep private. Dad, what happened? Amanda's telling everyone Eric got arrested. I shook my head, gesturing for her to come in. No one got arrested. But your brother made some bad decisions last night. He's got to live with the consequences. Lauren hugged me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm sorry, Dad. None of us should have let it get this far. We sat at the kitchen table, eating her homemade chicken and rice, just like we did after Helen passed. Lauren had always been the peacemaker in our family, the one who tried to keep everyone together, even as the years pulled us in different directions. She told me about the kids, how little Tommy got the lead role in his school play, how Emma had started soccer and loved it. I listened, grateful for the distraction, but my mind kept drifting back to Eric and the dark turn our lives had taken. Later, as Lauren washed the dishes, she asked, "What are you going to do now, Dad?" I looked at her, seeing so much of Helen in her face. I'm not sure yet. But I know I can't go on like nothing happened. Your brother has to face what he's done. We all do. Lauren nodded. You're a good man, Dad. I wish things had been easier for you. I smiled, squeezing her hand. Life's not about easy, sweetheart. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. That night I barely slept. I thought about my own father, the lessons he taught me about honesty, hard work, and standing by your family, even when they made mistakes. I wondered if I'd failed Eric somehow, or if he'd simply lost his way in a world that values money more than memories. Morning came, gray and drizzly. Eric arrived just after 8, looking exhausted. He carried a duffel bag, eyes rimmed red. He stood in the doorway, uncertain, like a boy coming home after breaking a window. Dad? I cut him off gently, motioning to the kitchen table. Sit down, son. He dropped into the chair, shoulders hunched, staring at his hands. I'm not going to yell, I said quietly. But I need to hear the truth. All of it. Eric took a shaky breath, and the whole sad story spilled out. Amanda's endless demands, the credit card debt, the fear of losing everything he'd worked for. I was desperate, he whispered. I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I could just get the money, maybe we'd finally be happy. I shook my head, my voice gentle but firm. Son, money never fixes what's broken inside. You tried to steal from your own family. That's not how we solve our problems. Eric wiped his eyes, silent for a long moment. Can I stay here, Dad? Just for a while. Amanda's kicked me out. I've got nowhere else to go. I studied his face, saw the fear, the regret, the faint glimmer of hope. You can stay, but you've got to help fix what you broke. You're going to call Amanda, tell her everything. You're going to get help with your debts. And you're going to earn back my trust, one day at a time. Eric nodded, the relief on his face plain as day. Thank you, Dad. I won't let you down again. We shook hands, a small gesture that felt as heavy as a promise. I knew the road ahead would be long, and forgiveness wouldn't come easy. But as the rain tapped the window and my son sat quietly at my table, I felt a small spark of hope flicker in the old house once again. In the weeks that followed, the house settled into a new kind of quiet. Eric stayed in his old bedroom upstairs, the same room where he'd hung baseball pennants and plastered the walls with posters when he was a boy. Now, those walls seemed to echo with memories of better times, birthday parties, late-night talks, the simple peace of a family that, for a while, had everything it needed. Eric tried to make amends in small ways. He fixed the loose rail on the porch, cleaned the gutters, and helped me with the garden. He called Lauren every few days, checking in on his niece and nephew, but Amanda still refused to answer his messages. The tension between them was a storm that hovered over all our conversations. He started attending meetings at the local community center, support groups for people in debt, workshops on managing finances, even a class on anger management. Each evening, he'd come home tired but a little lighter, like he was finally facing himself instead of running from the truth. One night, over bowls of chili, he said, "Dad, I never realized how far off track I'd gotten. I kept thinking if I could just make more money, all our problems would disappear. But it wasn't about money, was it?" I shook my head, remembering my own struggles, long hours at the factory, Helen stretching every dollar until payday, the satisfaction of building a life one small victory at a time. "No, son, it never is. People forget what really matters." Eric pushed his bowl away and looked me square in the eye. "I want to pay you back for everything, Dad. Not just the money, though I know that'll take time, but for breaking your trust. For putting you through all this." I reached across the table and squeezed his shoulder. "You don't owe me a dime. You just make sure you become the man your kids can be proud of. That's payment enough." We spent the next few weeks putting the house back in order, not just patching up the doors and fixing locks, but repairing what had broken inside our family. We cleaned out the attic, finding boxes of old toys, Helen's faded recipe cards, and the letters she'd written to me during our first years together. Reading them aloud, Eric wiped away tears, realizing for the first time how much love and hard work had gone into making this house a home. But life has a way of testing even the strongest resolve. One Tuesday afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail, addressed to me in a careful, unfamiliar hand. I slid it open, curious, and unfolded a single sheet of paper. "Dear Mr. Reynolds, I represent a group of investors interested in acquiring properties in your neighborhood. We are prepared to offer you $800,000 for your home, in cash, with a flexible move-out timeline and all closing costs covered. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience if you are interested in discussing this unique opportunity. Sincerely, Jessica Rogers. Rogers & Associates Realty." I stared at the letter, feeling a chill run through me. The same name Eric had mentioned weeks ago, the realtor who'd called about the house. The offer was higher now, almost double what the house had ever been worth. Too good to be true, I thought. I showed the letter to Eric that evening. He read it twice, jaw tightening. "They must really want your property, Dad. That's a crazy amount for this neighborhood." I nodded. "Developers, probably. Looking to buy up the whole block and tear these old houses down for condos. But this isn't just a house to me. You know that." Eric looked away, shame flickering in his eyes. "I know. I'm sorry for ever thinking you should just let it go." I shook my head, not in anger but in a kind of sadness. "It's not just about me, son. It's about remembering where you come from. If we let go of all our roots, what's left?" He was quiet for a while. "Do you want me to call Jessica Rogers? Tell her you're not interested?" "No," I said. "I'll do it myself." The next morning, I dialed the number on the letter. Jessica's assistant answered on the second ring, cheerful and efficient, and put me through. "Mr. Reynolds! I'm so glad you called. I just want to say again, this is an incredible opportunity." I stopped her before she could start her pitch. "I appreciate the offer, but this house isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. I built my life here, raised my family here. I won't be selling, no matter the price." There was a pause. Then her voice took on a slightly colder edge. "Well, Mr. Reynolds, the market is shifting quickly. You might not get another chance like this." "I'll take my chances," I said and hung up. After the call, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The house might be old and drafty in places, but it was mine. Every board, every photograph, every memory, those things weren't for sale. That evening, as Eric and I sat on the porch watching the sun set over the Iowa cornfields, I saw a black SUV idling at the corner, just for a moment. It didn't stop, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting for me to change my mind. Eric noticed my tension. "Everything okay, Dad?" I forced a smile. "Just thinking. The world keeps moving fast, But some things are worth standing still for. He nodded, understanding what I meant. The world outside was changing, chasing the next big profit, the next fast deal. But here in my home, beneath the quiet light of Helen's favorite porch lamp, I knew I'd made the right choice. Still, as darkness crept over the yard, I wondered if I'd heard the last of Jessica Rogers and her mysterious investors, or if trouble was just getting started. It wasn't long before the uneasy quiet was shattered again. Just a few days after that black SUV idled by the corner, a certified letter arrived, this time from a law office in Omaha. I could feel my heart rate quicken as I slit open the envelope at the kitchen table, sunlight slanting through the blinds onto the pale blue letterhead. Dear Mr. Reynolds, please be advised that our client, Rogers & Associates Realty, has been authorized to pursue all legal avenues to acquire your property located at 1043 Oakview Drive. If you do not accept our offer within 10 business days, we are prepared to escalate this matter through municipal channels. We strongly advise you to contact our office to avoid potential legal action regarding eminent domain, as well as to discuss your options for a fair resolution. Sincerely, Martin P. Langston. Langston and Myers, LLP. The words sat heavy in my hands. Legal action. Eminent domain. My blood ran cold, not just for myself, but for the entire street. These people didn't just want my home. They wanted the whole neighborhood, and they weren't above using threats. Eric found me at the table, letter trembling in my hands. He read it, face darkening with anger. They can't do this, can they? I shook my head slowly. Not unless the city gets involved. But when big money talks, sometimes the city listens. Especially if they promise jobs or new development. He clenched his fists, anger giving way to worry. We have to fight them, Dad. I nodded, feeling the old stubbornness rising up in me. We will. But we'll do it the right way. I called my old friend Bill Andrews, who'd been on the city council back when I coached Eric's Little League team. Bill was retired now, but he knew how things worked. After I explained, he sighed. Jack, they're buying up everything from the highway to the river. Some folks have already caved, couldn't turn down the money. But if you want to keep your house, you need to rally your neighbors. Get it in writing that you're not interested in selling. The more people who stand with you, the harder it'll be for them. We spent the next week knocking on doors up and down Oakview Drive. Some neighbors were scared, some angry, a few already packing to leave. But when I explained what was at stake, most agreed, this wasn't just about money. It was about preserving a way of life, a neighborhood where folks looked out for each other and shared more than just property lines. We held a meeting in my backyard, folding chairs scattered across the grass, lemonade sweating in pitchers, neighbors arguing and encouraging in equal measure. Old Mr. Caldwell, who'd fought in Korea, stood up and declared, I didn't survive 3 winters at Chosen Reservoir just to be run off my land by a bunch of lawyers. Even the Anderson twins, who hadn't agreed on anything since kindergarten, signed the petition. In the end, we got 14 signatures, enough to slow things down, at least for a while. During those days, Eric seemed to come back to himself. He took charge of organizing the younger families, ran flyers up and down the street, and started to find purpose in something bigger than his own struggles. One night, as we cleaned up after the meeting, he said, I never understood why you wouldn't just sell and walk away, Dad. But now I get it. It's not just a house. It's everything we built here. All the years, the friendships, the memories. I smiled, feeling proud for the first time in a long while. That's right, son. Some things you don't put a price on. But not everyone was happy with our stand. The next morning, as I was tending the roses out front, a man in a suit walked up the driveway. He looked out of place, shiny shoes sinking into the soft earth, clipboard in hand. Mr. Reynolds? He asked, voice smooth as silk. My name's Mr. Lane. I'm here to offer you one final chance to reconsider. My clients are prepared to raise their offer to $900,000. Cash. That's life-changing money for most folks your age. I wiped the dirt from my hands, meeting his gaze. You can tell your clients to keep their money. I'm not selling. He didn't blink. You understand, of course, that holding out won't help your neighbors. You're just delaying the inevitable. Everyone's got a price, Mr. Reynolds. Not me, I replied. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got work to do. He left without another word, but the threat in his eyes was clear. I called Eric outside, told him what happened. Eric was quiet, anger simmering beneath the surface. They're not going to stop, are they? No, I said. But neither am I. That afternoon, as the sun slipped behind the trees, we gathered in the living room to make a plan. The legal threats would keep coming, the offers would get sweeter, and the pressure would rise. But for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't alone. My son was with me, the neighbors stood beside us, and Helen's memory watched over everything we did. Before bed, I checked all the locks again, the routine now as familiar as prayer. I stood at the window, looking out over the darkened yard, and thought about all the storms this house had weathered: tornadoes, blizzards, family fights, and now, a new kind of siege. As I turned away from the window, I caught my own reflection in the glass, older, yes, and a little more tired, but also resolved. I remembered something Helen used to say: a home is only as strong as the people who refuse to let go. I turned out the light, heart pounding, and slept for the first time in weeks without fear, knowing that, come what may, I'd stand my ground. A few days later, trouble found us again, but this time, it didn't come in a suit or a letter. It came late at night, under cover of darkness, with the kind of boldness that only real desperation can breed. I woke up to a strange sound, glass shattering somewhere near the kitchen. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. But when I heard footsteps on the hardwood, every sense in my old body snapped awake. My heart thudded, and I reached instinctively for the baseball bat propped behind my bedroom door. Eric was already out of his room, eyes wide. He whispered, "Did you hear that, Dad?" I nodded, holding a finger to my lips. "Stay here. Call 911. I crept down the stairs, every creak sounding like a gunshot in the silence. The moon cast long shadows through the windows, making every corner look dangerous. I could hear someone moving around in the kitchen, rifling through drawers, knocking things off the counter. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to be quiet anymore. From the staircase, I could see the outline of a man, tall, broad, moving quickly and nervously. I recognized that limp immediately. My hands tightened on the bat, not just with fear but with a sudden surge of anger. "Get out of my house!" I shouted, my voice filling the darkness. The man froze. For a split second, I saw his face in the moonlight. It was one of the men from that night, the night Eric brought them to the door. He looked at me, his eyes wild, his hands clutching something shiny from the silverware drawer. Eric came thundering down behind me, phone to his ear, shouting that the police were on their way. The intruder glanced at the front door, then at the window he'd broken to get in. For a tense moment, I thought he might rush me, but instead, he bolted for the back, shoving the screen door open so hard it crashed against the frame. I ran to lock the front door and check the rest of the house. Eric followed, chest heaving with adrenaline, eyes darting to every shadow. We turned on every light, checked every room, and waited for the police to arrive. When they finally did, lights flashing, guns drawn, it felt like an eternity had passed. The officers swept through the house, gathering statements, dusting for fingerprints. They patched up the broken window with a piece of plywood and took down everything Eric and I could remember about the intruder. "It's the same crew from before," I told Officer Daniels. "One of them's got a limp. You might still catch him if you move fast." Daniels nodded grimly, scribbling notes. We've had a couple of break-ins along this street in the last month. Could be they're getting desperate. After the police left, Eric and I sat at the kitchen table, too wired to sleep. My old hand shook as I poured us both some coffee. Eric finally broke the silence. This is my fault, Dad. I brought those men here the first time. Now they think this place is an easy target. I shook my head, setting down my cup. No, son. They're responsible for their own choices. You made your mistake, but you owned up to it. That's more than most would do. He nodded, but I could see the shame still weighing on him. We spent the next day cleaning up the mess, sweeping up glass, resetting the locks, checking on neighbors. I called Bill Andrews again and told him what had happened. He promised to bring it up at the next council meeting. We'll get extra patrols in the area, he said. These guys will find out we don't scare easy. News of the break-in spread through the neighborhood fast. Folks started looking out for each other more, keeping an eye out for strange cars, walking in pairs after dark, even setting up a neighborhood watch. Mrs. Caldwell brought over some fresh pie and a baseball bat of her own. Just in case. She winked. For the first time, I saw the real power of a community that stands together. We weren't just fighting for our homes, we were fighting for each other. But the threats didn't stop. A few days after the break-in, another letter arrived. This one wasn't from a lawyer or a realtor. It was just a single piece of paper, slid under the front door in the middle of the night. No name, no return address. You can't win. Sooner or later, you'll have to give up the house. Take the money, old man, before someone really gets hurt. The words chilled me more than the broken window ever could. I showed it to Eric and the police. Officer Daniels took it seriously, dusting for prints and promising to patrol the area even more. Eric wanted to call Lauren, to warn her and the kids to stay away from the house for a while. I agreed, even though it hurt not to see my grandchildren. Family's got to be safe, I said. We can't let these people scare us, but we don't have to invite trouble either. The next week crawled by, full of tension and small victories. Neighbors dropped by every day to check on us, bringing food and sharing stories. The Anderson twins rigged up a motion-activated camera out front, and Bill loaned me his old hunting dog to sleep on the porch at night. For the first time since Helen passed, I felt the full strength of the community she'd always cherished. Still, the threat hung in the air, heavy as a storm waiting to break. Late one night, after Eric had gone to bed and the house was quiet, I found myself in Helen's old rocking chair, staring out at the moonlit yard. I talked to her photo, like I'd done 100 times before. I wish you could see this, Helen. You always said I was too stubborn for my own good. But I'm not giving up. Not now. Not after everything we built. As I sat there, the night wrapped around me like an old blanket, I knew the fight wasn't over. But neither was I. I'd survived worse storms. I could survive this one, too. The final chapter of this battle came not with a bang, but with a choice, a test of whether I'd cling to anger and fear, or let go and finally live in peace. For weeks after the break-in, the tension in our home hung like a thundercloud. Eric barely slept, jumping at every sound. Neighbors stopped by daily, dropping off pies, casseroles, and news about the city council's progress. Officer Daniels made good on his word. Patrol cars circled our block every night, and the Anderson twins' camera captured footage of a black SUV cruising slowly past but never stopping again. I called the city attorney myself, determined to get answers about the threats of eminent domain. Mr. Reynolds, there's talk about redevelopment, but nothing has been filed. With all the petitions from your neighbors and the press attention, there's no way the council can push this through without a fight. Hold tight. I think you all bought yourselves more time than you know. Word got out, an old man refusing to sell, a neighborhood standing firm, threats turning into police investigations. Local reporters wanted interviews. I declined. I wasn't interested in being a symbol, or a headline. I just wanted my home, my family, and a little peace. But Eric, in a moment of resolve, decided to speak up at the next city council meeting. He stood up in front of a packed room, voice trembling at first, but growing steady as he told our story. He spoke about second chances, about the importance of roots, about how communities are built not with concrete and glass, but with shared struggles and loyalty. People listened. Some even cried. When he finished, the mayor thanked him personally. "Mr. Reynolds, you reminded us all what really matters. Whatever happens, we'll do right by you and your neighbors." By then, even the investors seemed to have lost their appetite for a fight. The legal threats faded away. Jessica Rogers' calls stopped. A few weeks later, I got another letter, this one simple and signed, but typed on the same blue paper as before. "We will not pursue acquisition of your property at this time. Consider this matter closed." I sat in the kitchen with the letter, a strange calm washing over me. The storm was over. We'd won, not just the right to keep our house, but something far more precious, the dignity of standing up for what's right, and the healing of old wounds in our family. Eric changed bit by bit. He took a steady job at the local hardware store, working alongside Bill Andrews' grandson. He paid down his debts, called Lauren and the kids every week, and even managed to reconcile, slowly, with Amanda. There were rough patches, but he faced them with the quiet grit I'd always hoped he'd find. The neighborhood, too, changed in subtle ways. Folks who'd barely spoken before now stopped to chat, swapping recipes and stories, sharing tools and time. Mrs. Caldwell's tomatoes became the talk of the block. The Anderson twins started a monthly barbecue that turned into a tradition. And me? I found peace in the simplest ways. Mornings spent watching the sun rise over Helen's roses. Afternoons in the garden, evenings in my old rocker, listening to the sounds of a living house, laughter, footsteps, the occasional argument, all the music of ordinary life. Sometimes, I'd catch Eric watching me, as if seeing his father with new eyes. One night, sitting on the porch under a wash of stars, he asked quietly, "Dad, do you ever regret not taking the money?" I thought for a long moment, looking out over the yard I'd tended with Helen, the house I'd built with my own hands, the neighborhood we'd helped hold together. "No, son. Money comes and goes. But this," I gestured to the glowing windows, the laughter drifting from next door, the sweet Iowa night. "This is forever. Some things you can't put a price on. Some things you fight for, no matter what." Eric nodded, a gentle smile spreading across his face. "I get it now, Dad. I really do." As summer turned to autumn, and the leaves burned gold and red across Oakview Drive, I felt the years settle gently around me, not as a burden, but as a gift. My house was still standing, filled with memories and hope, and my family, though battered, was whole again. In the end, I learned that the truest strength isn't just in holding on. Sometimes, it's in forgiving, in reaching out, in believing that even broken things can be made whole again. So if you ever find yourself in a battle for what matters most, remember an old man in Iowa who stood his ground, not for money, but for love, and for the legacy that lives on in every nail, every laugh, every stubborn, beautiful memory. And that, my friend, is worth more than any fortune.